Your Steve Jones Show podcast is loading now. The Steve Jones Show podcast is sponsored by Sunbury Motors, North 4th Street in Sunbury, and Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf.
On the line, as he does every week, Neal Coolong with you now with SI.com. Neal, welcome back. Happy New Year, my friend.
As always, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to get the new year kicked off. The right way to do it.
Exactly. Well, we're talking right now about I'm going to start with the Steelers, then we'll go to the playoffs. They ended up 9-8, so he still hasn't had the losing season. What made this a team that finished one game over the Mendoza line?
I don't know.
I love that. That's the right answer. I don't know either.
Yeah, anybody that tells me otherwise, like, you're lying. I mean,
yeah.
I used this line last year, kind of tongue in cheek, but this is really just the truth. The only thing this team does well consistently is win games.
Yeah,
and consistently, I guess, is kind of a stretch. I didn't mean to say that, but it's their fastball. They just somehow win these games, and most of the time, you kind of scratch your head wondering how it is that they did it. Now, I think it was more dramatic last year, but let's go through the sequence of events here. Going back to week 1, tapped off, getting into the season. It launched the new season with the most ridiculous win they've ever had.
Right.
And they had 5 of them the previous year that were, beyond comprehension how they were able to win.
Right.
I didn't think they could top that. They did it in week 1. How important was that win for the Steelers in the sense of the record? And look what happened at the end of the year as far as the AFC goes, because the Bengals somehow lost that game. Wouldn't have a problem if that didn't happen.
Exactly.
It's crazy how these things work out. But you really have to be impressed overall. All 3 phases of the game, the coaching staff, what they put together to win, 7 of their last 9 games. That's an impressive streak by anybody. And it wasn't pretty football. I'm not saying if they had just gotten one win, they would have torn it up in the playoffs. Very well could have lost by 50 again at Buffalo. But it's impossible to not admire what this team has done with what I feel was lower-end talent overall, especially on the offensive side of the ball. You went through 4 different quarterbacks played in the last 35 games, including the playoffs for them. None of them were particularly outstanding. And overall, you saw a quarterback change 4.5 weeks into this year to start a rookie who was, I think it's fair to say, about as bad as the guy he replaced early. Watching him improve the way that he did with the thinnest possible reason to believe the playoffs were possible, it went down to the wire for them. The quarterback improved. I don't think he played particularly well in that last game, but he improved greatly. There were opportunities for him the last 4 games where his team really needed him to step up and be better than what he had been, and he did. I didn't get a game-winning drive against Cleveland, but there was he had the opportunity in the third quarter to put the game away, and he led them down the field to get that touchdown that they needed. He's doing that more and more. You have to be really encouraged about what he has going into next year. And this is a team that, beyond rational comprehension, has to believe heavily in itself, because it should not have accomplished what it did. And I'm not saying that anybody's bragging about it, but objectively, the sum of the Steelers a whole was way higher than the sum of their parts. And now they've got significant draft capital coming their way.
Yeah.
Maybe not in the form of a bounty of picks, but 3 picks in the top 50. They haven't had that in a while. That's nice. They can make some moves with that. They've got holes that they still need to fill, but they're in a vastly better position now than they were last season. And this team, I don't think, better or worse, it's close. We're not talking about much of a margin there, but they should have been, in my opinion, this season. The fact that they weren't makes me excited about what they have in front of them. And I think the right moves, another good off season, they could be, fairly close to being a contending team. I don't think they're far from that.
And what strikes me is that Freiermuth is a given. There's no question about that. Harris was okay his second year. But it looked like Pickett right out of the gate developed a really good chemistry, not just with Freiermuth, but with Pickens. And Pickens is now far enough removed from that torn ACL where I think at the end of the year we were seeing who he really is.
I saw George Pickens do things I haven't seen a receiver do, and it happened a couple times this year. He is, in my opinion, I said this when they drafted him too, he is the most naturally gifted receiver the Steelers have drafted probably since Lynn Swann.
Yeah.
He has an amazing set of skills. I've said this with you, Steve, a couple times in the past. I go back to what Mike Tomlin said about T.J. Watt when they drafted him. He's not raw, he's just inexperienced.
Right.
And I think that's what Pickens was.
Yep.
It's everyone was saying, well, I don't understand why he's not getting the ball 13, 14 times a game. Well, he's barely run routes before. I mean,
right.
He didn't play all that much in college. What he did, who he is physically, is what got him drafted in the second round. But he's a top 15 talent. I don't think anybody denied that. It's a question of you have to develop him, and you get him on that shorter contract. Putting that together, it's a critical offseason for him. I was of the guy he replaced, largely because 2 seasons in a row, he came onto the field. This is Chase Claypool. Mm-hmm. He came onto the field looking like the same player he was the year before.
Yes.
You need to put in work at that position. He didn't differentiate himself at all. Granted, I would have bet you any sort of money there's no way the Steelers would have gotten a second-round pick for him in the season.
I agree.
No way. I'm still blown away that
happened. It's the steal of the year.
It's oh, my God. Bears fans that I've talked to about this, too, they're just delusional. It's like, okay, you realize you drafted the guy to replace Claypool in the second round. You traded a second round for Claypool, who hasn't even lived up to a second-round billing. And your pick went through the roof in terms of value after you made the trade.
Yeah.
I'm not blaming Claypool for that, but you can't argue the fact that he had 12 catches in 6 games.
Yeah.
You're complex team here. You're not getting a whole lot from him above the shoulder. The fact that the Steelers drafted a rookie who was inexperienced, didn't play much in college, and there wasn't even a question that he was the outside receiver,
right,
really goes to show you what the Steelers thought of it. You can blame the Steelers offense all you want. I don't, I'm not making any bones with that. But what, is your offense better? I don't understand. What makes you think he didn't contribute to a bad offense? Why is he going to contribute to yours? And you just gave us a premium pick, considering it's the 32nd player who's going to be drafted. And on top of that, you took him in his most expensive rookie year for this coming year. After he gets camp in, give him a chance. Then you have to pay him. We got him; didn't pay him anything really for 3 years. So,
right.
If you guys are happy with the pick, great. I'm not going to argue with it. I think it's great.
Well,
and wish him the best. I'm not rooting against him. I'm just saying if there's Steelers would have taken a third for him. I think at the end of the year, I don't think they would have traded him in season for less than a second, just because, well, they didn't have anybody. There's no depth on their receiving group. They lost who was supposed to be their slot receiver. Anthony Johnson was set to be their slot receiver.
Right.
They had to make hay with Steven Sims, and you know what? It worked out. I'm not saying he's great or anything,
right,
but to get 33 overall for a player that really didn't produce inside the slot or really know what he was doing, it works out great. I don't think enough people are really talking about how valuable that move ended up being.
It's going to pay huge dividends. The Bears, by the way, will end up with Jalen Carter out of it, or multiple picks if they decide to pick it in the end. If they decide to trade it. You and I both know that the NFL has a depth of caring when it comes to cash. I believe that's a fair statement. At the end of the year, you and I are watching Skylar Thompson, Joe Flacco, Davis Webb, And that's just the quarterback position. So now and you and I both know they want to go to 18 games. But geez, Neal, when I'm sitting there and I'm watching a 17-game season play out, the attrition rate is exactly what the Players Association said it was going to be. It's not good.
It's not good for anybody except Skylar Thompson.
Yeah, exactly.
At least Joe Flacco got one more game out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be a problem. There's no doubt. You and I have talked about this a couple times. We always kind of hung our hat on, you're seeing at the beginning of the season. You know, it seems like teams treat week one more as a preseason game.
Yes.
They'll never admit to that. But, this year it was definitely in the final week. And I think the extended season eliminates teams earlier, and you're working on what you're working on. Players need to have film. But when you get lame duck situations, which happens often, Arizona, I wasn't exactly shocked when, it was announced that Cliff Kingsbury got fired. I think they knew that 2 months ago. They're probably not.
Neal, you and I knew that when he was hired.
Yeah, that, if you want to go to that. It's amazing the career that he's parlayed into a general lack of success is what he does.
Yeah.
I wish I was that unfortunate. I'm racking my brain. I don't know who started at quarterback for Arizona. I really don't remember.
It probably was Trace McSorley.
One of those guys. Yeah. Somebody.
Yeah. Penn State's own.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah. He's a veteran journeyman. It gives those guys some opportunity. Maybe there's some utility in that. Baseball plays 80 useless games per team a year. It might not be bad for the NFL for that, but for the starters who are playing, for example, where I'm trying to go with this is Las Vegas is playing a meaningless game, and Jacobs played the whole time.
Yes.
He played the preseason,
Yeah,
too.
he did.
It's like, at what point is this going to become kind of like, well, wait a minute, hold on.
Yeah.
You're making him do everything.
Yeah.
You're not even going to pay him. At what point are they just going to say, I have a hamstring injury, I'm not paying this week. I'm playing this week. I think that's where it's going.
Yeah.
And it's going to become very... if a team is competing, I'm not suggesting a player is going to sit out.
Right.
I feel Lamar Jackson was legitimately hurt, but
I agree. Lamar
Lamar Jackson didn't exactly have a ton of motivation to play in the final week, or the week before that, or the week before that. He couldn't practice last week, but he's fine on Tuesday, Wednesday to go like he is now. Good. I'm glad he's healthy. Playoffs are better when Lamar Jackson's in it. I feel that. But you're going to have to give snaps and reps to other people. And my question is, at what point are the starters who are playing going to say, I've got my film, you're not going to be here, I don't need to be out here anymore, I'm not going to play, especially when nobody else here is playing. It almost just kind of seems like it becomes an unofficial week for journeyman, generally graded as fourth string NFL quarterback, get an opportunity to play. I think that's kind of what we saw on Sunday.
Yeah, the opening round of the playoffs, of course, will be this weekend. So Philadelphia really needed the bye, to be honest, because they need to buy Jalen Hurts another week. They need to buy Lane Johnson another week. And to be honest with you, they didn't play well down the stretch. They need to buy all of themselves another week. I felt for Philadelphia, getting that bye was huge for them.
Yeah, I would agree, but caution flags are up. You see the teams that get banged up a bit down the stretch, ones that may not be consistently with the group they have headed into the playoffs. There's a lot of concern for rust for that team coming out. Dallas and Green Bay, I think, was 2016, I want to say.
Yeah.
Dallas played horrendously in the first half. And Green Bay, I don't think was really all that great of a team anyway that year, but they could score points. And that was the game where each kicker hit like from 53 plus
yes,
twice in the final 2 minutes or some crazy deal like that. Dallas spotted them like a 3-touchdown lead. It took them that long to break the rust off and then get going. I'm worried about that with Philadelphia. It's a lot of football. It's not your opponent. It's you. You've got to execute. You've got to do things right. And there's so much rhythm that goes into that. I wonder if they're going to be able to hit the stride that you expect them to hit. I just don't think It's a great coaching staff. They're a very talented team. I picked them to win the Super Bowl at the beginning of the year.
Yes, you did.
I would expect them to find what they do well, but I wonder how long it's going to take, and I wonder how much defensively, especially, they're going to be able to hold their opponent to at least, in the worst case scenario, 7-10 point deficit. From that, I feel like they can come back against, probably anybody, but they have to get off to a good start. But I almost feel like you need to play this conservatively. You've got to run reps right away. Your script is going to have to be the absolute basic stuff that is going to work, and you're going to have to get them make some contact, put a little sweat on their brow, and try to advance with the rest of the flow of the game. But I'd be concerned about that. For the bettors out there, those first half lines for Philadelphia are real tempting.
Yeah. And it's interesting. Bernie Kosar on a talk show talked about laying money on the line for the Browns. He lost his job over it. That's an interesting part of this, Neal, is that the NFL has no problem taking money when it comes to wagering. They have no problem putting up signs in stadiums dealing with wagering. But boy, if somebody talks about actually physically wagering, they go after them, and that I find that to be interesting on their part.
It's a real slippery slope.
Yeah,
I'll say this: there are plenty of establishments that do not allow their bartenders to drink on shift.
Right.
Nobody would call that hypocritical.
Mm-hmm.
There is something in this. This is a bit of a stretch, but there is something to say. And I hope Al Michaels isn't listening, but there's something to say about wanting your play-by-play personnel to not inflect any sort of influence one way or another. Now, I don't want to accuse Kosar of anything in particular. It's obvious why he was doing what he did. The only reason the Browns even knew about it is because he talked about it. The amount he bet was obviously in reflection of his jersey, and he was doing a good thing.
Right.
That the real sin, I think, is bringing it up, because there is a rule that says the NFL has a habit of this. They write rules without always seemingly anticipating
unintended consequences.
Yeah,
yes.
The stuff that comes with it. And I think this would be a good example of it.
Yeah.
They don't want to fire Bernie Kosar for that. It's not as if he was, going over his 14 Ts while the Browns were driving to score points, because we all know the Browns don't drive to score points anyway. It wasn't the point that he was making with what he said. And I think you get into spirit of the law versus letter of the law.
Right.
They have to go by the letter of the law because they write it that way. They just have a real problem with avoiding painting themselves into a corner. And it happens all the time. As far as the league goes, let's be honest. There are, I think, reasonable concern allowing players to bet on games.
Oh, no question. You're right about that.
I don't think anybody can reasonably disagree with that.
That's right.
To suggest that there is hypocrisy that exists because they're going to profit on non-players betting on the game, I feel like that's intellectually dishonest. I think you're in typical fashion. Most people are against the NFL in whatever way they are for making money. Like, come on, let's not be naive here. Their policies against players gambling have never changed.
That's right.
They did not get involved with gambling until it was legalized.
That's right.
Imagine that. You know what? Here's the thing. I wouldn't be surprised if when marijuana to whatever degree is legalized across the country, they'll find a way to profit on that.
Yeah.
That's what companies do.
Yep.
It doesn't make them hypocritical.
That's right.
It just if anything, you're just supporting the idea that the NFL follows the rules, which probably isn't true anyway. But the point is more, they have to follow things that are obvious and in the public eye. Gambling and sports, it's about as perfect a union as we're going to find. There's no way they're not going to get involved. That does not mean players have the right to gamble. They just don't. It doesn't make any sense to allow them the ability to do that.
That we have you on every week. So, my good friend, as always, thank you.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm looking forward to keeping this going.